Welcome, everyone, to the Goddess Vibration podcast. This is Ali.
And this is Tiara.
So, today, you guys, we want to talk about kind of like a silly little spin-off of like if any of you like romantic comedies, and this was like one of the best ones. It's one of my favorite ones, How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. It's kind of like a similar concept of the topic that we want to talk today, which is we noticed in the collective there is a lot of fear. Obviously, there's a lot going on in the world, and I think things are only going to get crazier. Things will get much, much crazier before they can get better, right? It's like things have to be destroyed. Things have like old systems have to break so we can implement new systems. And some of that is definitely happening on the world stage, especially because the political leaders have this thing called Project 2025, which they've been implementing in a lot of the countries across the world. And they want to put together this new world order before 2030. And so it's going to be a really crazy few years. And that's leaving a lot of people in a very like unsettled place. And that's making people feel very uncertain, fear, petrifying fear, because it's like people just don't know if they're gonna, wake up the next day, and that's really unsettling. And because we are a self-help spiritual podcast based on Tiara's and I's own personal experiences, because her and I have been through a lot and we have this very close bond, and we've been helping each other in this journey. That's kind of what we bring our own experiences into this. Like, we are not psychologists, we are not psychiatrists, we are not going to pretend to be, but you know I have done my journey, and I feel like, you know, there's a lot of things that I've done. I've made a lot of mistakes, but there's also a lot of things that I have been able to navigate through, where have finally found myself come out on the other side through a lot of my darkness. And Tiara is in the midst of all of her darkness. And there have been a lot of like missteps or mishaps and things that she feels like she wished she could have done differently, or things that like she needed to go through so she could learn from them. And she wanted to document some of that and share some of that today on our podcast. So this is going to kind of be a spin of like, things that you want to look out for, or things that you shouldn't do or shouldn't want to do. And hopefully we can save you and, like basically save you from some of that pain from the mistakes like we've made in our own journeys.
So I just want to back up for a minute here. It is March 2026 and the world is on fire. Like, like the hopelessness and the helplessness energy that she was mentioning earlier, it's very palpable. And I spend a lot of time on X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it. And I swear, like my entire feed is like hellfire and mushroom clouds and carpet bombs. And I'm just like, how on earth did we get here? So I feel like there's a lot of us right now in the collective who are not only seeing the state of the world and are just feeling like, oh my God, like overwhelmed and helpless and hopeless, but aside from that, you have like your own inner journey that you're also supposed to be working through on this path to becoming a better individual. And so I just feel like there's just so much going on internally and externally everywhere. And we're kind of all just collectively exhausted. And so, that's part of the reason why we decided to do this episode, is because we were like, well, what can actually be helpful given the state of the world right now? So, I just wanted to, share that like I get it, and I get why everything energetically just feels so heavy. And I'm not just talking about the war either. Like I'm talking about the Epstein documents and the state of the economy, especially in the United States. And I'm seeing also a lot of negative sentiment towards the United States and towards Americans everywhere. And then we've got like an AI apocalypse potentially happening too. And I'm just like, this is so much. So please, everyone, do take care of your mental health the best you can. Take advantage of your connections and community if you can, like lean on each other because that's going to be so, so necessary as we continue into this age of Aquarius. My TED talk today.
Yeah, the age of Aquarius is it's been a wild ride, and I mean, the transition just happened. We are at, like, the beginning stages, so it's like all these people who are just wishing and hoping, like, it will be over soon. I don't wanna be the bearer of bad news, but I'm just saying I would strap in and just get ready because things have to get worse, and it's
Oh,
like
yeah.
that's just the perspective I bring into it is like things have to get worse and things need to fall because the American empire is coming to an end. Like our
Oh, yeah.
reign is over and Tiara and I are speculating that probably China will be the next reign, their dynasty. And yeah, we are going to be in for a really rough few years and the the thing that keeps me going is that, it's like I understand that things have to get worse before they can get better so we can rebuild. Things have to be destroyed. Systems need to fail and break so we can implement new systems.
You know what sentiment I'm also seeing that I just think is so interesting is a lot of Americans are like, "Yeah, we need to fall. Yeah, yeah, we are on the side of Iran. We want everyone to come and get our president. Like, we are not interested in this war." And I'm just like, "Wow. I never thought I would see the day where Americans would abandon their own country's ideals." Well, actually I did. But
Actually, I totally saw
no,
that.
no, yeah, I was gonna say I was gonna do. But to this extent, I was not expecting. Like little circles here and there, but like, oh my God, my Twitter feed is just everyone is just like, we don't want this, and we are all cheering for the other side. And I'm just like, wow, okay, very interesting.
Well, we didn't ask for this, you know what I'm saying? We didn't. It's just like I understand that people have sentiments towards Americans, and I absolutely understand why, but you have to understand it's like our country's made up of over 300 million people. Not everyone asked for this, and so it's not an individual citizen's fault.
It's not, and we're not a monolith either. Like, I know, it's easy to assume that we are, like, oh, those Americans, they're all the same. But actually, we all have very various differing beliefs. We have our own opinions. We all didn't vote for the guy in office. So, there's the beliefs that, I mentioned, but also there's also a lot of discord within America too, just amongst people who feel differently about the leadership in the country. And it's just weird to me that there are still so many, like these people still exist, that do support everything the president is doing. There are a lot of people that do. So, when it comes to a lot of the online discourse, we still have to be mindful of other individuals' opinions at the same time. But yeah, there's that happening also. So, in addition to what you're seeing on a global scale in America when it comes to like the war, there's also a little bit of civil infighting too. So, there's just so much going on right now. And a lot of people have very fragile mental health currently, which is understandable and makes a lot of sense. And so, again, just like please take care of yourselves and take advantage of those resources. If you have a therapist, hold on to that person for dear life as long as you can afford to do so, because like it's going to get, as Ali said, it's going to continue to get rough.
Right. And so we just want to bring in some of our personal experiences in terms of like our healing journeys because I feel like people want to heal. I feel like people want to try. And I'm like, the hard truth about healing, you guys, it's one of the hardest things you will ever do in your entire life. It is not easy by any means. It's a lot of self reflection, self preservation. It's a lot of looking at yourself from objectively. It's a lot of admitting your faults and bringing in that self-awareness of like, oh, well, maybe it got worse because I escalated things instead of staying. in victimhood instead of staying in, well, it's everyone else and it's not me. And it involves a lot of goodbyes because you're going to
Mm.
outgrow people who want to not change or want everything to stay the same, and everyone wants to stay in their own little bubble. And it's interesting because those people view you as the problem. They're not the problem, you are the problem. And so you'll drift apart from your inner circles. Healing's actually extremely painful, but you don't do it for the world, you do it for yourself. So you can rise above your own trauma and you can create something new. And that's why a lot of people choose to take the path, because people want to be different. People want to choose something different, be different, and, actually have meaning and purpose in their lives. And this is why, you know, the people who are serious about healing make these decisions, because you find peace instead of staying in like this constant stressed out people pleasing, trying to make everyone happy, external validation. And it's exhausting to try to fit into these circles. It's exhausting trying to, keep up with the Joneses, as Tiara likes to say. And, you know, it's just like you're living for other people at that point and you're not living for yourself. And so healing is really about removing the toxicity and start living for yourself so you can live from a more authentic place, because authenticity is the highest frequency there is.
I will say that the fact that healing is so painful is, I think, a big reason why so many people don't choose it. Like, I will say for myself that I did recognize that I would have to make some big changes if I wanted something better for myself. And I knew that I did want and need something better for myself. I knew that the path I was taking was very different from the paths I've taken in prior lives. I was absolutely certain that this is what I wanted, and had a bit of an understanding of what was necessary, but I will say I didn't fully understand the extent of what would be necessary and what I would really have to do. In other episodes, I've mentioned that I got caught up in the Love and Lights. For those of you who are not familiar, Love and Light is a belief system in New Age where you just focus on the light aspects of the healing, the incense and the crystals and the tarot and the affirmations and the meditations, without focusing on the shadow side of the work, which is looking at your inner wounding, inner child wounding, subconscious beliefs and negative destructive patterns, how you've been harmful to yourself and others. So I initially, that's kind of where I got stuck. And, you know, it's nice. Love and light is nice. It's comfortable. You kind of get to do things at your own pace. A lot of that stuff is fun. Like, I absolutely loved exploring crystals and tarot and oracle decks and burning my incense. And while I didn't really meditate much, I did enjoy like the biannual beats and like the high frequency music and stuff like that. And I was just like, this is great. This is spirituality. Great. I can do this all day. But along this path, I did have, Ali and a lot of her team telling me, "Hey, you've gotta do a little bit more than this. Like, all the stuff you're doing is superficial and surface level." Now, initially, me being an individual with narcissistic traits and a very fragile inner child and ego, I was just like, "What the fuck are you talking about? Like, I'm doing everything you guys are wanting. I don't know what you mean. I feel some kind of way that I'm being told this. So, yeah, F off." Which, if we're going to talk about things you shouldn't do, you definitely shouldn't do that, right? If you're getting guided and supported and they're telling you something very, very specific, you might want to heed that. I will say for my part, a lot of times I didn't fully understand what they meant, right? Like, I didn't always fully understand, oh, this is what they mean when they say, surface level stuff. Like, to me, I hear surface level and I'm just like, oh, so you're telling me everything I'm doing was a waste of time, right? Like, so for me, it was really tricky because I had this big ego of mine over here telling me things that weren't what they intended and meant. And so I think for a lot of my journey, that happened very frequently, and that also derailed a lot of my progress in varying ways. Now, interestingly, I kind of knew that I was a perfectionist and that I sort of had these traits of needing to prove my worth in some kind of way through perfection and through doing everything the right way, which is interesting when it comes to healing because I honestly didn't know what the right way to heal was or is and still don't really know. But I think it looks different for everyone. And I wasn't quite sure what it looks like for myself. But I think a lot of what my ego told me distorted a lot of the things I needed to do and set me back in various ways. And I just say that because I think when it comes to healing journeys, anyone's healing journey, the ego is probably going to be your biggest enemy. Like, I hate to use the word enemy, but ultimately, it's if you can't get past your ego, none of the healing work is going to materialize and help you the way it needs to. I mean, that's just the unfortunate facts of the matter. And for myself, like my ego has always and continues to be my biggest hindrance. So for me, I do think that the ego limitations have set me back many ways, different ways, just depending on your perspective. And I'm still working to overcome that. So recognizing the perfectionism piece, I kind of did this thing where I like took off my ego. Now, I do not recommend anybody do this. Nobody do this, right? But like I turned off my ego. And the crazy thing about it is that you actually do need your ego, right? Like your ego isn't just there to hinder your healing. Now, me being the extremist, also, I was convinced that this is what was necessary, right? Like, hey, here I am trying to heal, but my ego is causing problems. All right, get rid of ego. Got it. So that's what I did. Uh, but that didn't help. That didn't help either. Because now underneath that, I have all the wounding and all the hurt that the ego was there to protect me from, staring me in the face and making healing even more difficult. So I do not recommend anyone do that. If you do want to do ego death or get past your ego, I do recommend you do that with support system or with a shaman or something. Do not do these. Don't do what I did. Um, and so I'm still figuring out what my ego looks like at this point because I took that mask off and I disempowered the ego so much. I don't know what my ego looks like anymore. And that has also made things very, very tricky. So, what is that? Two do nots? Two do not do's. Do not take off your ego mask. And when you are getting guided and supported from beings who want to help and serve you, listen to what they have to say.
Yeah, that's a really big one. Tiara spent so much time and energy like fighting back, or I call it the Tiara thing and she hates it.
Oh, God.
Where like we would say something like we would give her advice or guidance and she'd be like, "Okay, cool." And like she didn't ask any questions and she'd just be like, "Okay, so they said this thing and then this is the Tiara thing." She would interpret it any way that like seemed good to her or was within her comfort zone or like was within like that love and light aspect and we're just like w- we're confused because what did you hear and you're like well you guys said this and we're just like okay but that's not what we meant and this is how you took it and this is how you twisted it and now you've set your journey back even more and Tiara would just be like oh, okay. And I know because I know Tiara, like we've known each other like 12 years at this point, and I know Tiara is basically like cursing at us in her own head, being like, "Well, fuck you guys." But we're just like, yeah, yeah, we don't really know how that happened or how you got there, but can we redirect?
And that's the thing that's so tricky when you have an ego as gigantic as mine is you hear things like you literally hear things completely different from the way it was intended. Like, that is a real actual thing.
It's
Like
wild.
they could say to me, like what I gave the example I gave earlier, where they were like, "Hey, a lot of the stuff you're doing, the love and light stuff is very surface level. Like it's just only like one surface level layer." And what I hear is, "You're wasting your time. Haven't done anything right. Like everything you've done has just been not worth doing." Like that's literally how I heard that. And so that makes me feel some kind of way, and then I get resentful, and then I get frustrated, and then that's what sets me back, right? So I really would have to say for individuals on this journey, like pursuing this journey, like you've got to do whatever you can to get a hold of your ego. Like it's just so important. And while, yeah, I know my ego twisted a lot of things, but it wasn't just that, like, that piece of it. I also struggled a lot with fears and uncertainty and a lot of doubts, like doubts that I can even do this path, or doubts that I'll be able to do any of the healing at all, that I'm not doing anything right. I'm just wasting everyone's time. Like all those things would come up. And every time they did, it would just affect me emotionally, and I would just get set back further and further and further. So, like, whatever you can do to get a hold of the ego is so critically important. And that might mean working with a therapist. That might mean considering substances. I've had to consider substances, medications, prescribed or not prescribed. Just anything that helps me ease my ego a little bit, because as long as it has as much power as it does, like I just always will continue to struggle. Um,
I have a question about the fear. Did the fear So are you saying that a lot of your fears were just ego-based fears?
yeah, a lot of the fears were ego-based fears and pertains often to what I might discover or what might be down there in my shadows. Like, and I know one specific fear that I sat with a little bit earlier was tied to how I might discover something in my shadows that validates why I'm unworthy. That was there. Or that I might discover something that might, like, destroy me emotionally forever or something along those lines. Like, you just end up catastrophizing or catastrophizing. And I did that often, often.
Right, and that's, like, a lot of the reasons why Tiara ran for the hills. Tiara's trauma response is definitely freeze or flight.
Mhm. Oh, yes. Phase or flight, and it's interesting because, like, it got to this self-perpetuating cycle where, like, I know I need to heal. I know what is necessary, but then that would cause more anxiety, so I wouldn't do it, and then I would freeze. Like, it was just weird, this weird cycle that I would get stuck in, and I think a big part of it is just because I didn't fully understand what was being asked of me, even though my ego told me that it did and that I did understand. So that also was a big component and factor for a lot of the setbacks that I continue to struggle with.
Lack of understanding is definitely important when it comes to the healing journey, because if you don't understand the behavior, if you don't understand why you do the things that you do or where that behavior comes from, or if you have absolutely zero self-awareness, or if you have no idea how to pick up on pattern recognition, these are all things that are going to stunt a person's healing growth. And that is really hard to be able to look at yourself and be like, "Okay, what are the negative patterns that are holding you back?" And, like, unfortunately, we just live in a society that there's a lot of issues with our society, and I could take this in many, many different directions, but, like, just for the sake of trying to stay on track in this episode, unfortunately, we live in a society where a lot of people root for you to fail. right? Out of like their own insecurities or out of like their own jealousies. And it's like I don't understand why we live in a society where so many people are ganging up against you because they want to see you fail because they think that you're undeserving or unworthy. And so it's really hard because it's like it's really hard in the healing process, especially when you have a bigger circle. If you're like popular, my heart actually goes out to you because it's like, it's like you have more people in your life to enable the bad behaviors, like being like, oh, well, it's not you, it's them. Like you're not the problem, it's them. And then you have all these other people in your ear that's like, in your ear. And that's where it gets really confusing because you're just like, oh, okay, well, my friend thinks this of me and they don't think that I'm the problem. And they don't, it's like we enable kind of negative behavior or, we kind of join the pack in like tearing other people down. And unfortunately, that's just how society is run. And so that's why I'm telling you, healing becomes really lonely because you have to be able to remove yourself from all of that noise, from all of that negativity. And you need to come up with your
It is
own,
so incredibly.
you need to be able to look at yourself. Yeah, because you need to be able to look at yourself, like, objectively without all the noise, like, you have to come up or you can be very fortunate to have friends in your life or people in your life who are willing to have those really hard conversations with you. Are they fun? No. Can it ruin a friendship or relationship? Yes. But it's as long as the other person knows that it's coming from a place of love and concern versus a place of we want to see you fail and we're rooting for you to fail out of their own insecurities or whatever. And so it's just I've been very fortunate. I mean, trust me, my life has not been all rainbows and sunshine. Like, it's like I felt very attacked when I had to go through those really hard conversations. Now, I've started like my parents, you know, I didn't like it as a kid. I didn't understand it as a kid, but like my parents were willing to sit down and have those really hard conversations with me about my behavior or telling me like, "Hey, you can run all you want to, but like all your problems are going to follow you. It does not matter how many distance you put between what you think your problems are. Like they're going to follow you because the issues that you are having are within your behavior. The issues that you are having is within your own ego. Like I was very egoic. I was a very black and white thinker. I was very like, nope, there's only yes or no, there's only right or wrong. There's only like you either get it, it's like either 1 or 100. There was no like 2 to 99 in between for me. It was just like that's I had the very extremist black and white thinking and I was just like, well, there's either a right way or there's a wrong way and there's nothing in between. And so it's just I again was very fortunate to have parents that just be like, "No, there's like this whole gray area and you really need to learn how to like let things go and you really need to learn how to like relinquish this rigid thinking that you have boxed yourself into." And it's like I didn't understand any of this as a kid, but like it's like Tiara and I will talk about, the past sometimes or our childhood because we didn't know each other through our childhood. And she'd just be like, your parents, like, I get why that was probably very unpleasant as a, kid, adolescent, teenager. But she was like, they planted so many seeds. And, and it's just like, it's completely changed my perspective to a lot of my childhood because my parents actually paid me a very great service that I can only now recognize as an adult.
So Ali was mentioning earlier about how healing can be lonely because you have to let go of certain connections. And that was also very hard for me. Honestly, very, very difficult, especially when it came to my family. Now, if you're like most families, you might recognize that there are toxic dynamics in your family, or you might not. But I will say that most families, to some extent, have some type of toxic dynamic in there happening or going on, right? That's just kind of how it is. And I knew that there were many things in my family that were very unhealthy and patterns that were like emotionally destructive. And I recognize that. But I I always had this philosophy that blood was thicker than water, right? Like, even if that's the case, like, your family is your family and you can't get rid of them and there's nothing you can do about it and you just get used to it, right? However, healing doesn't work like that because I realized that a lot of the things that my family wanted, especially even for myself, didn't align with what I wanted for myself. And it ended up being like this friction or this tension amongst us where I wanted to take this very specific path and go in this very specific direction. And they were just like, you're crazy for that. You should be doing this. And over here, going this particular path, the traditional way, the 9 to 5, the work, the pension. Like, that's what you should be doing. This entrepreneurship stuff is such a risk and a waste of time. And I wrestled with it and I kept going back and forth with it because I was like, well, they're right, right? Like, yeah, this is a huge risk. I don't know that this is going to work out. I know it's something I really want, but that doesn't mean that it makes sense to do. And then at the same time, I'm looking at like my career prospects and how diminishing those are starting to become, especially in economy 2026, and how difficult it is to find a job now. And I'm just like, do I really want to continue down a path that isn't sustainable any longer? Like, I wrestled with it so much. And this is also something that came from Ali and her team about how I really needed to start looking at why it's necessary to let go of my family and release that sense of control and influence from them, which probably to this day is one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. Like, when I tell you I cried over that, oh my God, I cried over this. It was so difficult. But I had to recognize that it's not so much about letting them go forever and like distancing myself permanently. I mean, if it's incredibly toxic and that's something you need to do, like, absolutely. But it wasn't like that for me. It was just, I know that there's this negative influence that they have to the point where they were actually energetically sending psychic attacks. Now, if you guys know anything about psychic attacks, you can like think of someone negatively or just think ill will towards someone. And that essentially is an energetic attack. I don't think people recognize this much. It was pretty new to me too when I learned about this, but yeah, that's a total thing. So I knew that that was going on, and I could actually be being energetically sensitive and having worked with energies could feel it sometimes. And a lot of it was just like, what is she doing over there? She should be over here working and getting a job. And she's so lazy and she thinks she can just go international and party and like do all this stuff while we're over here slaving away. She's just wasting her time and wasting her energy and she's just going to fail and blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, what is this energy? So eventually, yeah, I had to send some Dear Johns, knowing deep down within myself that I do absolutely love my family and I will always love my family, but also recognizing that I need to put distance between us because energetically, that's just what's for my best and highest. So I recognize that those type of decisions and choices can be so tricky and difficult. And that is another one, another not do that if it is necessary and needed to make or let go of individuals energetically in your life because being connected to them is harmful to you, you absolutely should do that. Again, so hard to do. I get why it is. It's not a walk in the park, but at the end of the day, if that's what you need to do, it's something you should absolutely consider doing.
For sure. And I mean, by the way, I just want to be clear, we didn't make Tiara do that. And I know she didn't send that message in the podcast. It was just a suggestion because it's something I also had to do. Like, it's like I've distanced myself from my family and sometimes you have to do that just to keep the peace. Something that my mother actually taught us, which maybe it was a good lesson, maybe it wasn't, but my mother always said to me, even if we're family, she was like, my mother presented it in a very different way from Tiara, which was family is blood is thicker than water. Like, we stick together no matter what. Doesn't matter how toxic we are, we stick together no matter what. Now, I kind of learned the opposite lesson where my mother was just like, she taught me a lot about energy. And my mom was just like, even if we are family, she was like, toxic people are toxic people. And yes, toxic people can exist within families. And so if you need to distance yourself from that, then that's what you need to do. And, I don't know which is the better lesson. Maybe I think there's value in both lessons, but, it's just something that, my mother was always very like, she was like, there's members in our family that I'm not as close with. And she was like, and I'm totally fine with that. Like, I don't put time and energy into someone who isn't willing to put time and energy into me. And so, like, I just learned very different lessons, and it's just, I'm kind of seeing this whole go we are gonna go off topic for a second, but I'm seeing this whole war between boomers and millennials right now. And a lot of millennials are cutting off their boomer parents because we feel like our boomer parents have let us down or misled us or have lied to us, or, we're kind of blaming the boomer generation for why things are as bad as they are in today's economy. And so there's a lot of riff right now, and there is like it's actually happening en masse, and I see it on TikTok where people are just like, the entire millennial generation is basically disowning the baby boomers. And obviously baby boomers, who can use social media, have come on to also TikTok to respond to us millennials doing that. And like there's this really interesting war going on, and I just feel like there is a lot of toxicity that did come out of the boomer generation, and unfortunately the boomers raised us millennials, so it's not that surprising. um, because us millennials, like, there's been debate that us millennials have actually, like, we were very blessed because we were the last generation to understand what it was like to grow up without technology, but us millennials also have been through like 5 crises, and it's not getting any better for us. So we feel some kind of way about
I'm sorry. Boomers are insane. I think they are absolutely
it.
freaking
Okay, see, there
insane.
you go.
Like, I am just like, what do you mean if I stop buying avocado toast and work harder at finding a job that I'll actually make something of myself? It's 2026. Would
And
you
this
like
is
to
the
see my
debate, you
student loan
guys.
balance? Like, I just cannot, for the love of me, understand why they think this is still 1994. I just don't get it. I have people in my family who are like this too. And I'm just like, no, it's not like 1994 anymore because they have their jobs and they have their pensions and they're comfortable. And so
And
they
their
can't
houses are
see.
mostly paid off, and,
Right.
and they could actually afford to go to school without taking on student loan debt.
Right. And so they're like, well, if we can do it, why can't you guys? You guys are just lazy. And I'm just like, you know what? I'm so done. And I get why we are all in mass letting go of the boomers because I'm over it too. Like, you can only say that stuff to individuals so much before you get blue in the face. And I'm done. No, I'm done. No use trying to get them to understand at this point.
Yeah, that was, a really heated discussion between Tiara and a family member, and I was
Oh
just
my
like,
God.
why is she thinking like that?" And she was like, "'Cause she's crazy."
Right. Insane. Crazy.
Yeah,
So,
and that's exactly, like, the sentiment. She was like, "Well, you guys like your lattes and your avocado toast," and she's just like, "No, it's not about the lattes and the freaking avocado toast, it's about the fact that I'm drowning in student loan debt, and it's the fact that, like, companies don't pay us enough, don't companies don't pay a living wage, and inflation has gone up so much that none of us can keep up. We're all living paycheck to paycheck. None of us have any savings. None of us know how any of us are going to retire. That's what this is about. It's not about avocado toast and lattes."
right, it's not. And mind you, I have student loan debt because you told me I should go to college to get a degree and take on that student loan debt because guess what? In the future, I'll be able to find a job and be able to pay it off in just 5 years. Yeah, that's the kind of stuff we were
Dang,
taught.
5 years? I wasn't even taught 5 years. My mother was like, "You'll be able to pay it off in 10."
Yeah. So, yeah, no, I feel some kind of way. And I
And a
get every other millennial who does.
And a lot of us do, because Tiara and I are both millennials, and a lot of us do. And it's just like, and that's what I'm talking about. It's about this type of programming and toxicity. And I would say the biggest hindrance that Tiara has also been struggling with in the like do not do's is like Tiara is, I don't like the programming is so deeply ingrained in Tiara, and trying to unprogram some of that has just been an uphill battle.
Yeah, and that could probably be its own episode, honestly. Like the programming you get from your family and from society and from your lineage, just as you get older, it gets more deeply and deeply ingrained. And a lot of it has just been so difficult to unravel at this point. Like it's just so, so hard to the point where eventually I was kind of like, I might need to consider things like medication to continue to work through some of this stuff because of how deeply embedded it is. And when it's deep like that, it can create anxiety and inner tension and inner turmoil because part of you wants to hold on to it and then another part of you recognizes it needs to be released, and then so you end up having this inner conflict that creates anxiety. And so a lot of that has been going on with me. uh, Now I will say I've been doing a lot of this stuff without expert help or support. So I want to get into the money piece and the money component of this, because oftentimes when it comes to like getting some of that healing work, whether it's therapy or hypnosis for some of the deeper stuff you need, or like healing work, energy work, a lot of that stuff requires money and a lot of it because this stuff is not cheap. So if you don't have those resources, I do think it can hinder your journey in many ways because unfortunately we just live in a society where money makes the world go round. Money healing is money, money is healing. And so when you lack those resources, it does make things much more difficult and it slows you down, and it can also be a hindrance, especially if you don't fully know what you're doing, if you don't really have the best resources and support or guidance. So I do recognize that lacking of resources can make things much more tricky. I know that many of us just don't have that, regardless of our circumstances or desire to want to heal. Some of us just don't have that. So my heart goes out to all those individuals who do want something better and more and just don't have those resources. The only thing I can say is to maybe consider exchanging, which is something I've considered and done a couple times actually, where you just exchange services with someone, or consider books, or consider looking for support groups or something along those lines, because you never know what some of those opportunities and interactions might lead to.
Yeah, money is definitely, I'd say, the biggest stressor in the world. Like, I have seen so many sad, sad sentiments of people just being like, "So, like, this isn't life." Right? Like, I don't feel like I'm living. I don't even know why people call this a prison planet. I don't know why I'm trapped on this planet. People are calling this place a hellhole. People are calling this place all kinds of things, and rightfully so, because, it's like going back to the boomer discussion, they were just like, well, you get an education, you get a good job, and you get your 401k, your pension, your social security, and you'll be able to retire when you're 60.
Hmm.
And so many of us, well, we took our advice from our parents, and we followed that path. But like what our boomer parents didn't recognize is that coming out of school, because I mean, especially when Tiara and I were graduating, now it's gotten a lot worse, and I recognize that. But like around the time that Tiara and I graduated from college, like the average student was coming out with, like, this is undergrad, $30,000 to $40,000 of student loan debt. Now, undergrad Gen Zers are coming out with about 60 to 80. So that just kind of gives you an idea of, and this is undergrad only. And so that kind of gives you an idea of inflation. and what that's been like, and a lot of us have followed this path, and then, it's like my first job after my college degree, I think was like 45 grand. Like, okay, so I'm making 45 grand, but like I'm in $30,000 with the student loan debt. So how is that possible? And unfortunately, it's only gotten worse over the years.
Mhm.
So it's just, you have to understand, it's like we followed the programming, we followed the path, and now a lot of us are just like, okay, I'm drowning in student loan debt, I'm living paycheck to paycheck, I don't have a penny to my name, I can't even have fun, I can't even go out to a bar for a drink, I can't even go out to a restaurant and enjoy a meal. I am literally scrounging for pennies in my couch, and I'm worried that I won't even be able to afford groceries to cook, and I basically never leave my house because every time I leave my house, it's $500, and just feel very trapped, and I don't feel fulfilled, and I don't feel happy, and there has to be more to this planet. And that's the sentiment, and I understand why that's the sentiment because, like, Tiara and I both talk about it a lot. We're just like, where did it all go so wrong? How did it get this bad? And how do any of us even fix it?
Oh, and by the way, your entire circumstance, according to the boomers, is all your fault too. Let's not forget that one. I shouldn't I shouldn't keep reaming on the boomers, but like I don't know, I just feel some kind of way. Anyway, so I know we did this episode to talk a lot about some of the things you shouldn't do in a healing journey. I think honestly it just varies and it depends on the individual,
Of
but
course.
I think just again from my own experience, the things that I think people should really consider and think about when it comes to pursuing this path is taming that ego the best way you can. Because honestly, again, for me, it has just been the trickiest thing to overcome and to navigate. And I want to add a piece in here too about life distractions, because for me, this was also another hindrance. And a lot of what it's mostly because of what Ali was talking about how everything is just so chaotic right now and how hard we have to work to keep up with our bills and keep a home over our heads and food in our bellies. We have to work so hard now. People are working like two, three jobs just to get by. And when you are doing that, it's really hard to dedicate time and energy to your healing. Like it just is. Like, you're not like healing is the last thing you're thinking about when you're trying to figure out how you're going to pay your bills next month. It's just the way it is. So that's a really complicated one. Like, I don't necessarily have advice or recommendations for that type of struggle. The only thing I can really think of is, what I mentioned earlier when it comes to if you're struggling with resources, you're gonna have to get really creative, like super, super creative. Like I'm talking thinking outside of the box, right? Like, I mentioned exchanges earlier, like energy exchange or some type of service exchange, which I've done and actually works out pretty well. I've heard of other individuals swapping services when it comes to healing work. Or even just considering finding a support group or a group of individuals who are on a similar journey, because oftentimes we can lean on these other people for support in that way. So again, we're kind of at that phase in society where we need to start exploring new ways of being. And I think for a lot of us, that's going to look different to each of us. But collectively, I still am convinced that we're going to start gravitating more towards community, being community centric. And I think that that is going to be so valuable for all of us.
Oh, it absolutely will be. Community is the only way that we are going to be able to survive this. And the governments have done a really good job at dividing us, dividing opinion. It's like what Tara was saying earlier in the episode, it's like our current president, he literally has a following. It's almost like a cult following. Like he could, it's like I've seen people on TikTok be like, he could go out there and shoot someone on Fifth Ave in New York City in like the brightest daylight and I would still support him. And I'm just like, that's interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's just interesting how people can be so easily manipulated and influenced, and I think that goes back to why I find the human brain actually so fascinating, because it is interesting how, like, it's like they've ran so many social experiments on us, and it's just, I feel like we as society has actually kind of failed. We have failed all of the social experiments. It's like they've proven with COVID. It's just like, oh yeah, we can get them to wear masks and stand 6 feet apart from each other and avoid people, like as if everyone has the plague, and keep them indoors, and you know scare them with illness and health. And I'm just like, no, it's like they've done so many social experiments on us, and to see the direction that society has headed is, it's really sad, which is why people are saying, like, it's time to wake up. It's time to have the awakening. It's time to be more angry. It's time for us to come together. It's time for us to do something together. We are stronger together. Tiara said to me the other night, she was just like, I actually think we're meant for another revolution. I think we're meant to come together. There have been other countries who have proven this theory. Like, other countries have stood together as an entire country saying, no, we're not going to go to work. No, we're not going to pay our taxes. No, we're not going to pay our bills. And they have overthrown their own governments.
Speaking of other countries, I just before we conclude, I saw a Twitter post of, I believe this was France, and they were protesting. And if there's anything that the French know how to do, it's how to protest, because these guys had a big machine filled with manure, and the giant machine was spraying manure all over a government building. And I was like, now that is how you protest. That's what we need.
Yeah, well, I mean, you have to be careful with that, because we also don't want martial law. So be careful with that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's that threat and that concern, but should we let that stop us?
I don't know. That's a toss up. That's a
It's a
toss up.
toss up, right?
It's a toss up. I see pros and cons to both, but I mean, I'm telling you, you do not want that one con to come through.
That's true. That's true.
I don't know if that one con is worth the risk, because that one con is like permanent if they can successfully pull that off.
Mm,
And that's, I mean, you have to understand like what you'd be giving up if that happened.
hmm
So,
Understood. And I think ultimately that's why they haven't gotten too crazy in the U.S. We haven't gotten too crazy. I don't know how far we're going to be able to go with it. I just don't know.
exactly. So I don't know. I just hope that people learn something from this about, the things that are holding you back. And if you can relate to any of these stories about, like, the fear of healing and what it actually entails, or keeping that ego in check, that's a really, really big one. And bringing in that self-awareness and making those really tough decisions, because a lot of really difficult decisions come to play in the healing journey. Now, I have had friends and people in my life that's just like, "You know what? I want to heal, but I don't want to make those decisions." There are people who are actually aware of the decisions that they have to make, and they're just like, "I don't want to give up certain friends or certain family." And I
Mm,
know that if I decide to take this path, I know I would have to let them go. And I was just like, well, that's really interesting that you know that you have to let them go. So basically you're choosing them over you,
mm,
because like there are certain people in your life that are going to keep you from moving forward. And it's like, do you want to stay? Do you want to stay with, your ride or dies? Do you want to stay with your posses? Do you want to stay with what's familiar? Or do you want something different for yourself? And that's a really, really, really hard decision that people really struggle to make, and we get it because we've been there.
right, right. Yeah. So I do hope that some of my examples of the don'ts was helpful too. Again, this is me with mega ego. If you've got mega ego, it might have resonated a little. I know not everyone has mega ego, but I do. So hopefully, there was something helpful to extract from that.
We'll get Tiaras to talk about what a mega ego is in another episode.
Okay.
I'm just like, well, she's saying mega, and I don't know if people really know what a mega ego is.
All right. All right. We'll make that another episode.
So we hope everyone just hang in there, be kind to yourselves, and then, like I know it's hard because we've all become so isolated, but you got to start putting yourselves back out there, find a community, reconnect with people.
Yes, absolutely.
So our hearts are with you guys, and it's like we would love to hear from you guys. You guys can always reach out to us, and thank you to everyone who listens, and I hope everyone has a fantastic week.
All right. Thanks, you guys.